All right, welcome to the channel. This is the track guide for the BMW M2 at Summit Point. I think this is a fantastic track, one of my favorite on iRacing. Before all my videos, I like to kind of point out 3 tips that can help you guys think about the track and the car a little bit differently to hopefully help you guys get a lot faster. So I'll go over those really quickly before I jump into the guide. If any of you have ever heard of the string theory in racing, typically it means when you're using the throttle or the brake and the steering wheel, the more you turn, the less you can use the gas or the brake. On this track, in this car, I think that is super true, specifically while cutting distance. So thinking about the exit of turn 1, how much you turn relative to how much throttle you can put down and avoiding that traction control cut. Those are some things that you really need to think about. Cutting distance is great, but sometimes going a little bit wider to be able to put the power down better can help. So as you can see, coming through turn 1 here, sometimes it makes sense to wash a little bit wider to be able to put that power down. The other thing is coming into turn 1 specifically and several other corners on this track, this car does not like when you slam the nose down by spearing the brake. Think almost like trail braking onto the brake as you go into some of these braking zones, and you might be able to brake a quarter cone or half a cone later than you might otherwise be able to. As I was getting a little bit quicker at this track, that was one thing that I found that I was doing in turn 1 that was hurting me. As I started to sort of set the nose down more gently instead of bouncing off the bump stops, I would actually stop too quickly and screw up turn 1 because I would hit the curb on the inside because I slowed down too much. The other thing too is think about the right foot through the S's, so turns 6, 7, 8, 9. Think about that specifically from a reference of trying to manipulate the weight and control of the car, because the more you do that, the quicker you're going to be in this car. Taking a look at things from a perspective of like, how do I create more grip with the weight and the balance of the car, and how do I minimize understeer and put power down? That is the best thing to do. All right, so let's jump into the lap and let's see here. So going into turn 10, I really think the best trick here is to avoid jumping the car on that curve and then use all of that runoff all the way over to that gravel. You have a long run up to turn 2. And for those of you that are familiar with the Miatas, your braking references are going to be a little bit different. For me, it was right about the 4. And I do want to point out something, as you can see on my trace here. Let's back that up and take a quick peek. So we're braking right about here, right at the 4 board. But you notice that it doesn't spear all the way up. You almost see it round off here. That's what I'm talking about, because you don't want to spike the brake to the point where the nose of the car kind of bounces and then hits the ABS. It slows you down a lot. So here, talking about avoiding that traction control cut, you can see I'm hesitating. I'm not trying to turn too far to the right, and that allows me to put the power down better than I otherwise might be able to. This corner here, I like using that side road as a reference and just using all of that runoff. I think the trick through that corner is carrying as much speed into it as you can and not turning too early. That curb on the inside is very dangerous. Now into this corner, one thing that I brought up in some of my other videos talking about elevation. So you'll notice here, this is all downhill. So what you'll notice is you're not going to be able to use 100% of your braking because you're effectively going downhill. So the braking is very, very limited. So you're probably going to be somewhere in that like 60 to 70% range for the brakes. So that's one thing that I do see people make some mistakes on. And I do also think through this corner, I did notice like right here on that 2-3 shift, that seemed to give a lot of traction control. So you can see over here that traction control light. It kind of does freak out a little bit. So let's rewind. Let's watch this all the way through. So again, try to position yourself just about middle track, a little bit positioned over on the right. I start braking. I use like this tree as a reference as it starts to get close to my side monitor over here. I do like to get onto the brakes. Again, start to trail into the brakes a little bit or to softly settle the nose. Now going into this corner, high entry speed and you really try to keep things pretty tidy into this corner. I like holding third. Little too much curb there, which got me a bit loose. Kind of widen up here, and you can see the throttle. I'm managing the balance of the car and the grip and minimizing traction control, but also maximizing corner exit through these S's. So before we jump into the end here, I want to walk back through these S's again. So you'll kind of notice into this corner, I like keeping it in third, and I also think going back to turn 5, some people might prefer to keep it in third as well, and that does avoid that traction control cut from shifting from 2 to 3, which I do think could be ultimately a little bit quicker. But so third through here, higher entry speed, kind of maintain that, wash a little bit wide, avoid bouncing the car on that curb. That curb on the right unsettles the car heavily. You get a ton of traction control. It kind of bounces a couple times when it settles, and it's going to make you miss this corner. You're going to be set up probably way too far to the left. So the goal here is really to sort of maximize the entire section. So one of the things you have to realize is that you really want to be as fast as possible from the exit of 8 through 9, because there's a long straight. So you might have to give up a little bit of speed entering 9, because 9 to 10 is a much longer run. So as you can see, like the position here that I make, you can even get a little bit wider to like sort of late apex or hit the back side of this curve. So instead of having the car pointing this way, we want the car pointing this way so we can get over to the right as much as possible without smashing this curb. So as you can see here, if we do the rear chase, I'm using a little bit of the curb. What you don't want to do is hit the curb sort of at this angle from further back, because that's going to launch the car up in the air. And then back over, you can see I position the car. I just kind of want to bring it over here. So if we look at the chopper cam, I have the car just about to the right of this line. What a lot of people do, and where the big mistakes are made, is when your car isn't here, it's over here. So basically, if you're looking at this corner and you have your car pointed this way instead of this way, now you can see like we get it rotated pretty well here, and we're pointed the direction we want, and our reference point is realistically going to be this edge of the curb here. You see we get very wide to the left here, and then you can use all of this curb, and then you're going to run the car. Let's go back to the cockpit for the exit, all the way out to this curb. So you're going to basically touch the grass. For me, the reference is where the edge of this curb is. You can run 2 tires through that without getting a 1X. But again, like I'm using pretty much all of this, half the tires running in that dirt, because I'm trying to carry as much speed as possible. Like I said, the run from 9 to 10 is long. You have to carry as much speed as possible through this. Run through that grass as much as you need to. So going into turn 10, this is a very interesting corner for me. In the MX-5s, my reference is usually this little patch of dirt. In this car, since we're carrying more speed, I do think you're on the brake a little bit sooner. So you can see I'm just starting to get on the brakes. This is a very light and gentle approach, because what you really want to do is you're going to drag your brakes to sort of create more grip over the front tires, because this is a roughly 90-ish degree turn. And for me, it's all about being able to rotate the car as early as possible to roll back into the throttle. So there's a couple of things here. Let's watch the telemetry. We'll kind of watch it full speed, and then we'll rewind it there for you. So we're going in, kind of do a little bit of trailing, drag that brake, feather it flat all the way to the gravel. Try not to run into it, because you can lose a lot of time if you run through the gravel. It sort of slows the car down. But one of the biggest things, I do recommend you avoid jumping this curb. If you bounce this curb too hard, what'll happen is it'll sort of settle you a little bit too far to the left. Usually you end up running wide. I like to just sort of skim it, if anything. So you can see just how close we are. Maybe look at the chopper cam. Just about touching it. But if you start putting tires in the grass, you can get your 1X, or it'll kind of throw that end of the car up and then slam down, and you get understeer on exit, which makes you have to get back into the throttle later. So again, you can see here, you do that trail brake all the way down, drag it through the corner a little bit, and then you sort of roll back up, back on about 40, 50, 60%, and then slowly go back to 100%. As you know that you're not going to run wide. And you can see here, I try to run right along the edge of that gravel. not putting too much of the tire into the gravel, because what happens then is it sort of slows the car down artificially. You have a hard time putting the power down. So that is a lap of Summit Point in the M2 CS. Such a fantastic track. I think it's going to make for great racing in this car. If this is helpful, like, subscribe. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Enjoy a uninterrupted lap at the track. Thanks again for watching.